Hey, everyone, and welcome to this week's edition of Laying the Leadership Podcast. I'm your host, Thomas Poole, and I'm joined by
Stephanie Jurasic.
And this week we'll be talking about a needs-based assessment. This is something we have not done yet, so this will make this a two-part episode with the second part being probably in a couple months. So we might have to replay that for you guys before we actually give you our feedback of how our needs-based assessment was. But first, I guess, Stephanie, would you mind sharing what your thoughts are on a needs-based assessment, a little bit what it is, and what we hope to find out from the needs-based assessment?
Absolutely. So a needs-based assessment is one of the very first things that someone should do when they're taking on, especially a new project or really anything if you're trying to change a current project and you're really looking for that feedback to figure out where your focus really needs to lie. So a needs-based assessment, you can give it to your target population. So for us, it's going to be the student athletes as well as coaches, so that we can really get a sense of where the students feel our leadership opportunities are and where they want to improve their leadership skills, and where the coaches think the leadership opportunities are and where they want their students and their student athletes skills to improve as well. And I mean, you and I, Tom, have an idea a little bit of where we think the focus should be, but the needs-based assessment is going to tell us whether we're way off base or if we're right in line with what our student athletes are thinking.
Yeah, and I think you hit the nail on the head as we're looking for our student athletes are looking for, at least what they think the areas that we can improve in. But I also think having the coaches and the administrators get their feedback just makes it so much easier in terms of zooming in on what everyone thinks we need to accomplish. And I think that's where we start to get some of that buy-in as well. Because I think that ultimately, if you and I come up with a couple areas that we think we need to work on, the formation group does the same, the student athletes, coaches, and administrators, they do the same. If there's two or three of them that overlap, I think we're definitely right on point in terms of, well, this is what we thought, and this is what we all agree upon, and that's obviously an easy starting point.
Exactly. You want to get as many perspectives as possible, because what we're thinking, if we just go with what we think is needed, we don't consult the coaches, we don't consult those student athletes, and we just create a program without consulting them, then we don't know if anyone's even going to want to participate, if there's even going to be any interest, because what we think is needed might not be needed at all, or that's not the top of their priority list. They need to get to X, Y, and Z before they get to what we were thinking. So you really want to use these needs-based assessments to dig in and meet those student athletes where they are.
Yeah, and I think one of the things I think obviously is going to come up from the student athlete standpoint is they just want some more leadership development. And I think we've seen some of that from some of our student athletes, at least from talking to some of them. And I think that right now, probably AIC offers the best leadership, I guess, leadership position would be a captain on a team or a part of the SAC executive board, but I also don't know that we necessarily do enough right now to actually teach and instill that leadership stuff or the content or anything that goes with it. I think it's more of, well, we're here to help you, but we just don't necessarily help build those skills up or help them identify what needs to happen. What are some of the things that you think might come up on the needs-based assessment?
I think maybe some kind of life after sport, especially if we are trying to, we're going to be giving this needs-based assessment to all student athletes, but we've discussed with that pilot program doing it for like sophomores or the juniors level. So they might be looking a little past their college career, looking into what are they going to do as a life career. So maybe that transition from being a student athlete to being in the workforce, I think that might come up. Even just skills on being more self-aware of themselves and what their leadership style is. Some people might not even know that there are different leadership styles, or they might not know exactly where they fit because they feel like they fall into multiple categories. So I think that will come up a lot. And emotional intelligence has really been gaining a lot of exposure and a lot of interest in a lot of different sectors. So I wouldn't be surprised if we get uh, the needs assessment back and they're asking for some emotional intelligence training as well. What about
Well,
yourself? What do you think will be on there?
well, one of the things I was thinking about, the actual needs-based assessment from the form. I know that I was talking to Spencer Donahue about his program at American and his needs-based assessment. He sent me some stuff that they use, but one of the curious things that we actually haven't talked about yet. So this is, sorry if I'm blindsiding you on this, but what are your thoughts? Obviously, I think we want to know what sport that people play when
Mhm.
we're doing some of these, just because I think that gives us a little bit different of background, because a hockey player might be completely different than a triathlete, than a soccer player, than whatever,
Right.
what all the different sports. I mean, we have 26 sports at AIC, so we have lots of ground to cover,
Yes.
especially when you include race, gender, identity, even country. I mean, I can't tell you how many countries we have off the top of my head of student athletes and where they're from. So I think we have lots of different perspectives, which I think is valuable. But one of the other things I'm curious to see if you think it would be helpful to have on the needs-based assessment is what year they are in school or on the playing surface, because I could see how we might. I'm not saying we're going to do it, but how we could weigh a senior's perspective a little bit more than the freshman's, because the senior's been there for a couple of years. They've seen the innards of AIC athletics, who are freshmen, especially during COVID, they might not have been on campus or been on campus enough or a normal campus to see how we really operate in a normal year. So I guess, what are your thoughts on having both the sport and the, I guess, year that they are on the playing surface or in the classroom on the assessment?
Yeah, absolutely. I think those are vital pieces of information, especially what year they are. Because, like you said, COVID is a huge factor in what these students might come back with. Because you're right, the freshmen have not been on campus. Or at least most of them have not. They haven't had that full team experience, so they might not even know where their team is in terms of leadership opportunities and skills and culture. But I think to go off of that culture piece, it would also be interesting to know, because we've had some new coaches come in within the last year or two.
Mm-hmm.
So to see those freshmen, or I'm sorry, those seniors and juniors who have been under a different coach compared to the sophomores and freshmen who are now in this new culture that's all they know. So it's not really a new culture to them, but to see those differences of where those student athletes think the leadership development needs to be or where it needs to go, to compare those, I think would be really interesting.
Well, and you just brought up another really good point. We have some new coaches on our staff, which is always a good thing and a bad thing. You obviously have the good because they bring new ideas and can help shape some of the stuff with our culture. But at the same time, it's also interesting because they don't necessarily know who we are, and they don't know who we are as a department, which can make things a little bit more interesting. But one of the things I thought was, I wonder how a program like this might influence some hiring decisions in the future too, just from a coaching standpoint, because obviously once we implement this, and this just becomes another tenet of our culture, of our identity, of our who we are in general. So I wonder also how much of this assessment, which is obviously needed, will also help formulate and make us think a little bit more about who we're hiring in the future and how that will influence that long term.
Yeah, I think it would be amazing for it to influence those hiring decisions, because we are building this program so that we improve upon the leadership abilities, leadership skills, and really marry this into our core values as an athletic department. So we would really want to hire coaches, assistant coaches, GAs who complement that culture and who will support it and will encourage their student athletes to participate in it.
Yeah, and I don't know. I'm just it's one of those things that just literally just hit me in the face. I know we had lots of those moments when we were actually in the modules during the first 4 weeks, and a lot of those, well, that makes sense, but I've never thought of it like that. So it's just very interesting how all this plays hand in hand with ultimately the culture and who we are as an athletic department, and not necessarily just so much more outside of the two of us and the student athletes who will be leading and teaching, but also the coaches and the administrators and even people who we don't even have in our department yet. I just think it's very interesting the way it's all going to influence everything in the future.
It's exciting times, Tom.
It is. I mean, it's
It'll be
exciting.
fun
It's a
to
little
see.
nerve wracking. I mean, just because
No pressure.
yeah, no pressure whatsoever, but it's just one of those like, man, what we do here, and especially the buying we can get earlier, I think only the better it's going to be. Like we talked about with the formation group a couple weeks ago, that formation group is just so important to have. That when you include the formation group and now the needs assessment, and we're just literally in the first 3 steps. We have the, hey, this is what we want to do. Okay, well, that's obviously an important step. We have the formation group, which is, as we talked about, huge in this whole thing. And then now we have this needs-based assessment. It's one of those things where it's like, it's one big thing after the other. But one of the things I'm grateful for is obviously us working together on this. I can't imagine being someone like Spencer when we were talking, when he went through the wall program, it was just him. There's no one else on his campus there. And now I think they've done a good job with the program to make it to where it's you and a partner from your campus to do it, because I couldn't imagine trying to do all this by myself and doing it at a very high level just because of all the different factors that go into it.
Yeah, it's wild when you think about that they went in with just themselves in that intensive 3-day training and then came out with a whole program.
Yeah, to go from a 3-day training to 3-module training over 3 week or 4 weeks each module, it's just crazy to think about. But that will probably wrap it up a little bit here for our needs-based assessment. But one of the things we're excited for is our first formation group meeting next week. And then also we will be meeting with our law, I don't want to say, I can't really think of the right word, not professor, but oversight, Jeff O'Brien, who will be working with us to make sure we're hitting the different benchmarks and hitting the time frame that we're supposed to. So we're excited with that. So Stephanie, I guess, what are you excited for a little bit without spoiling next week's episode about, or I guess 2 weeks, what are you excited about in that first formation group?
I'm excited to, one, just meet. Took a little bit to get the formation group solidified, so I'm excited that we have one that we'll be able to meet. And this first meeting is really just kind of an overview of what everyone wants out of this. So I'm really excited to see the different perspectives and see if maybe you and I kind of maybe veer into a different path because of the ideas that our formation group comes up with.
Yep. So I completely agree with you. Just getting together. Just so y'all know, we asked one person to be a member of our formation committee, but due to situations out with their personal life, couldn't make it work. So we moved on to someone else who we think is going to be a great fit. But I think this is just another lesson of, just because you want someone to be on there doesn't mean that they're going to be able to. So I think that's something that we definitely learned, and we're excited for this other person to join us. But ultimately, it's about being flexible with all of it and making sure that formation group is as good as it can be. And I think that we have a stellar group, and I'm excited to see what we accomplish. So quick, were you going to say something, Stephanie? Didn't mean to
I
cut
was
you
just
off.
going to say I agreed with all of that. I'm excited to see what all these people will add to our ideas that we already have, and I think we have a really good, solid group going in.
So a little bit of housekeeping before we go. I want to shout out our guests from our last episode, Tobruk Blaine and San Jose State football for winning the Mountain West Conference. That's exciting for them, and we're excited to see where you guys play next and who. And then at the same time, once we get a little bit more footing underneath ourselves and get a little bit more of a structure. We're hoping to share some of the stuff that we have from the different discussions we've had, the paperworks, our meeting agendas, just in case it's helpful for you. We know that this is not something that we're starting off the ground by ourselves, but we're thankful for other people and the resources that they shared with us. And we want to do the same thing with you and help you along this journey. And as always, if you guys need anything or have any questions, feel free to ask us and reach out to us, and we'd be more than happy to help. On Twitter, my username is Thomas G. Poole.
Mine is SN Jurassic.
And signing off for this week's edition of the Laying the Leadership Podcast, I'm Thomas Poole.
I'm Stephanie Jurassic.
And we'll see you next week.